Hi everyone. So welcome to another episode on the series of incident response. As you can remember at the beginning of the series, I mentioned that we'll be having 3 classes for this series on incident response. We started with defining the difference between events and incidents, and then we moved slowly to the phases of incident response. And we started with what preparation stage is. We moved slowly to identification stage, which other people could refer to as detection and analysis. And then we moved to containment, to eradication. And then today we'll be discussing recovery stage of incident response. And afterwards, post-incident learning or lesson learned. That's, it could be called either of the two. And then I would share my screen and show you 10 different questions that likely would come up when it comes to incident response, either on ISC2CC or on CompTIA Security Plus. So stay tuned. So as I mentioned, we'll be looking into recovery today and post-incident lessons or learnings or something like that, or lesson learned. What is the recovery stage of incident response? Like, it's an English word. It's the stage where you recover all of the system that have been damaged by the incident or compromised by the incident, all of these, system, server, whatever it is that has been damaged. This is the stage where you then have to recover them. So what if we would say what the goal of, recovery stage is? It is to restore the system and operation back to normal after an incident safely and securely. That 2 words are actually very important: safely and securely restoring them. So during the recovery stage, there are so many activities that happen. It is in this stage that we've talked about eradication, which is the stage before recovery. But by recovery, you should have eradicated the threats. Whatever has caused the incident, you should have removed it, ensure that the backdoors are removed, ensure that you have blocked all the malware. Then in this stage, you're restoring back, you're reinstalling, you're rebuilding compromised machine, you are restoring from backups. And that's why I would also like to point out that backup is very important. This is also another topic that we might dive into, which is called, business continuity and disaster recovery. Usually for ISC2CC, it's one of the domains. They put together incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery, because you cannot talk about one without talking about the other. So it might also be a topic that I'll be willing to explore. Also, in recovery stage, there is a monitoring for, in case of residual issues, in case, you are not able to see everything. You're monitoring, you're checking your IPS and your IDS. By now, if you're watching my video, you should already know what IPS and IDS is. You're checking your logs from your SEM tools. You should also already know what a SEM tool is. You're checking if the attacker is still in the system or not. In this stage also, you're testing and validating. Before going back online, you are ensuring that everything is working, because recovery means recovery. Recovery means you're back to where you were before the incident happened. That's recovery. It's different from containment. Containment can be just, temporarily stopping it, or temporarily removing the machine or whatever it is, or temporarily removing the user account. Eradication might mean, okay, we are taking it out, the root cause. But recovery means you're bringing yourself back online as if the incident never happened. An example could mean that, let's say your house was broken into. Now, after kicking out the intruder or whatever it is, recovery will mean that you're back to normal in your house and you're watching for signs of trouble. You're not back and then not watchful, but in recovery stage, you're also watching, you're testing, you're validating to be sure that everything is normal and that the attacker is not within the system anymore. Now, what about lesson learned? So in this stage of lesson learned, you are trying to improve the security posture, security policies. You're sitting down and trying to understand what really happened. Why did it happen? Was it negligence on the part of somebody? Was it that a particular vulnerability was not patched? Was it that, it was an insider threat that somebody exfiltrates, data from the system? Lesson learned, it entails series of meetings where people will sit and understand what happened. How was it detected? it could also be something you want to add back to the incident response plan. If you remember at the beginning of the series, I mentioned that there is a documentation that has to be done during the preparation stage, which is called the incident response plan. This plan, you could come back to this plan again during lesson learn, where you put some of the things you have learned, you could modify this plan to fit into some of the things you have learned. So during the lesson learned, you're asking what happened, how was it detected, what went well, what didn't, how long did every stage also take. You're also checking this part, are the teams working and collaborating properly, is everybody's hand on deck during the eradication, the containment and the rest. You're documenting everything. Documentation in security is very important. I need to mention this part. Documentation is like one of the most important things in security. You also remember I was talking about clock synchronization when I was explaining that it's very important that your clock is in sync, because when an incident happens, then they could track the timeline. Whichever time zone you're using, they'll be able to detect when, maybe something, an intruder sent you or an attacker sent you a malware, a malware code or something, and it drops into your system or whatever it is. They are able to know, okay, it came in 11:19 a.m. or something like that. So documentation is very important. So in lesson learned, the timeline of the incidents that happened, the tools that were used, how the evidence was collected. Evidence collection is also very important in security. There is an order for which evidence has to be collected when it comes to, let's say endpoints, let's say your laptop. There is what you need to store first before the other, because some of those things are very volatile and could leave the system. So it is important that you store them quickly before others. And in one of the questions I'll be showing, you will see, one of the questions stating what is volatile and what should be stored early. Communication steps also, like I mentioned previously during preparation stage, you're putting the team together. And this team might entail people in legal, people in communication, because if an incident happened and you have to communicate it to your customer, let's say for example, a bank, you needed to communicate to your customers that an attacker actually exfiltrates their data, your comms team have to deal with it. A normal bank staff cannot just go about, go to their friends and say, oh, we have an incident in the bank, and then, data are collected. It could escalate. The customer could blow it up and say, we thought you could protect our data, our finances. How did an attacker get into your system? And it could get to the media. So that's why comms team are also part of this team that you put together. So the communication steps you took have to actually also be documented, that, when the incident happened, who did you go to first? And I mentioned previously about regulators. So in the case where it is, data privacy breach, there is a 72 hours time frame where you need to, reach out to the GDPR regulators. In the case of NIST, it's 24 hours. Once the incident is actually detected and you have agreed that yes, it is a security incident, then the regulators have to be reached out to based on the time frame they have laid out. And these have to be also documented. Updating of security measures also happen, around post-lesson learn. You already know its vulnerability is patched, but you also know for the future that, okay, we need to constantly patch this. If you need to improve something, if you need to train employee more, it's part of your lesson learned. So if you need to give them, if the incident happened with an employee clicking on a link or something, then if you need to train them more, you need to document it that, you need to train, this particular employee. You need to also improve incident response plan, like I mentioned before. The incident itself helps you to understand. The initial plan that is done during preparation is just for you to have an overview of what it should be like. The tabletop exercise is not exactly the incident, but when the incident happened, whatever you learn during the incident is what you also document for your post-incident learning. And I hope this is well explanatory when it comes to all the phases of incident response. So the next part you will see is me showing you the questions, and I'll be explaining the questions also as we go along. As you can see from my screen, these are questions that are brought out that, can help you understand incident response questions. I just pulled the question, and of course the answers are there, but I would also like to explain further based on the classes we've had. So the first question is, which of the following is the first phase of incident response process? If you have been following the series from the beginning, you would already know is preparation stage, which is followed by detection and analysis, followed by containment, followed by eradication, followed by recovery, and then lesson learned. As you can see, detection and analysis come after the organization has prepared through documentation, team setup, and tools. And that's what I said in the first series that we did. An employee reports a suspicious email that appears to be a phishing attempt. What is the most appropriate next step? The most appropriate next step is not to report it as a spam. Spam is different from a phishing email. Run a full antivirus scan on the user system. That's not the first thing to do. Escalate the event to the incident response team for analysis. That's the first thing to do. Block the sender domain at the firewall. No. Allow the incident response team to analyze and say if it is an incident. I mentioned because of the cases of false positive, I mentioned that you would allow them to say whether it is just an event, a false positive, or it is actually an incident. And that's when you have to swing into action to know whether it's a priority 1 or 2 or whatever it is type of incident. Now, the third question is, which phase of incident response involve verifying that systems are functioning normally and monitoring them for reoccurrence? It is recovery. I just mentioned it in this video that, you need to verify if they are actually running normally. Even after you have done eradication, is removing the root cause. Recovery is where you verify and monitor for reoccurrence. Containment is just the temporary solution to contain the situation so that it doesn't spread. And then lesson learned is putting together what you have learned during the incident. Now for number 4, the question says, during containment, which of the following action is appropriate? Power off all affected system immediately. That's not the right one. Capture volatile memory and isolate system from the network. That's the right one, but I would explain further. Delete all malware artifacts to prevent spreading. Begin legal notification and PR handling. Now, from the first one, you shouldn't power off immediately because you might lose some data. Capture the volatile memory and isolate system from network. This is the right one, but I'll come back to B. Now, delete all malware artifacts to prevent spreading. You might delete it, but the attacker might have gone into other places in the system and you might not be able to capture it fully until you understand it. Now, begin legal notification and PR handling. That's not the first thing to begin. You still need to be sure of what you're doing first before you start dealing with how to communicate, what does the law say about it. Even though based on the law, once you detect it is an incident, and that's the point of identification, you should contact regulators. That's how it should be done. Now, based on the option that is correct, capture volatile memory and isolate system from the network. I might not have spoken a lot about this, but there's something in incident response that is called order of volatility. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you're collecting security evidence, it is important to follow the order of volatility, especially when you're collecting something from, a laptop or something like that. So the first thing you should collect evidence from is the CPU and the register content. That's the first thing. The second thing is the routing table. And this is because these are where the data can easily disappear. So the second one is the routing table. Then the third one is the memory, the RAM. The fourth one is the temporary file. The fifth one is the data on hard disk. The sixth one is remotely logged data. And the last one is data on archival media. So in the order by which you can quickly lose this data, this is the order you should collect, the evidences. That's why there's a capture volatile memory. So from the first down to the seventh, that's, the volatility is reducing. That's why we call it order of volatility. Now, for number 5, what is primary objective of lesson learned? As we said, you have learned your lesson in order to prevent future incidents. That's why you're learning the lesson. Strengthen the control, work on your security policies, work on, whatever you need to work on to make sure that the incident doesn't occur again. That is the main aim. It is not to produce legal case or forensic for HR action or conduct employee disciplinary measures. It could happen in lesson length, but that's not the primary objective. As you can see in the question, it says the primary objective of lesson learned. And now, 6 says, which of the following is more likely to be included in an incident response plan? We have the host-based firewall rules, steps to rebuild compromised system, IP addresses of known attackers, risk rating for all servers, steps to rebuild compromised system. That is what we should have in incident response plan. It should be how to bring the system back. We don't need firewall rules in incident response plan as a document. Now, what is the purpose of chain of custody document? I also did not mention what chain of custody document is. So, chain of custody document is a document that makes sure that everybody that has touched an evidence is able to, they did not compromise the evidence. So, if I am, Miss A, and I touch the document, I should put it in a way that I have not compromised it, and, it could be checked that it wasn't compromised. And when Mr. B gets there, she actually meets it how it should be. So the options are to outline business continuity plan to ensure that all files are encrypted during transit, to track possession of evidence throughout its handling, because for chain of custody, sometimes it is required in the court of law to make sure that the possession of evidence is tracked throughout its handling. And it happens even in the forces, not just in security. It happens that when the evidences are compromised, then they will not be allowed in the court of law because they'll say it has been tampered with. So it's the same also in security. Chain of custody, you cannot afford to have it tampered with, or else it will not be, acceptable in the court of law. Now, number 8, after a malware attack has been contained, which of the following is the best next step? Now, collect system logs from surrounding systems, rebuild the system and return them back to operation, identify and remove the root cause, notify customer. Look at the question proper. After a malware attack has been contained, containment. So the next step is to eradicate, which is removing the root cause of the malware. If you think about the questions very well, they are very simple questions. Which of the following is the most volatile and should be collected first during a forensic? It's the RAM. In that order, the CPU is not there, the next one also is not there. The RAM, which is the third one, is the most volatile in these options. In this option is the most volatile. Event log could be remotely logged data, is down the list. So RAM is the first you might lose, so you should make it a priority. Who is the responsible person? Who is primarily responsible for managing, coordination, and execution of cybersecurity incident? The system administrator on duty, no. The red team, no. The cybersecurity incident response team, yes, that's the answer. The CEO or the CISO, no. So C is the correct answer because the cybersecurity incident response team are the primary people who are responsible for managing and coordinating the cyber incidents response, the cybersecurity incidents response. They are the ones that will dish out the roles and responsibility to other team, and they will be the ones to stay on top of it. And within this team, we have somebody called the incident commander. So, but I will not dive into it. So I hope this explains all you need regarding this topic. Stay tuned for more educative, video on cybersecurity.